The day I found my name carved into that old wooden wall, my son had just told me I'd lived a life that didn't matter. I remember standing there in the Veterans Hall in Dayton, staring at the letters Jeremiah Whitaker. My hands were shaking, not because I didn't recognize the name, but because I did. At home, I was the woman no one listened to, the one who never did anything remarkable, the one they quietly forgot while I was still alive. But here, someone remembered. And for the first time in decades, I realized something didn't add up. If I was so forgettable, then why was my name here? Before I tell you what really happened, I need to know. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? If you have, please like this video. It helps more than you think. And maybe subscribe so you don't miss stories like mine. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? I read every single one. Because sometimes strangers understand us better than family ever could. I've lived in the same small house in Dayton, Ohio for 32 years. It's a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people wave politely but don't really stop to talk. The lawns are trimmed, the mailboxes all look the same, and life moves in a slow, predictable rhythm. Most days, the only sound in my house is the ticking of the old clock in the hallway and my own footsteps. After Thomas passed away 8 years ago, the silence got louder. People assume you get used to it. That loneliness becomes softer with time, but it doesn't. It just settles deeper into your bones like cold that never quite leaves. I still set the table for one every evening. Out of habit, I suppose. Or maybe because setting it for one feels less lonely than admitting no one's coming. My son Ethan lives 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. That's all it would take for him to stop by. To sit at my kitchen table. To ask me how I'm doing. But weeks go by without a call. Months, sometimes. When he does visit, it's never really for me. It's for appearances. Mom will stop by Sunday. He'll say, already sounding distracted. Sophie hasn't seen you in a while. As if I were some obligation. A box to check. That Sunday, I remember standing in my kitchen, smoothing down the wrinkles of my dress, like I was preparing for something important. I even baked Sophie's favorite apple pie. The one she used to love when she was little, back when she still ran into my arms without hesitation. By the time they arrived, the pie had already cooled. Ethan stepped in first, his phone in his hand, barely looking up. "Hey, Mom." Just like that. No hug, no warmth, just a quick glance around the house like he was inspecting something outdated. Melissa followed behind him, her heels clicking against my wooden floor. She always dressed like she had somewhere better to be. Maybe she did. "Oh, Jeremiah," she said, her lips forming a polite smile that never reached her eyes. "You didn't have to make anything." I forced a small smile. "It's no trouble. I wanted to." Sophie lingered in the doorway for a second before stepping in. She gave me a quick hug, but it was brief awkward, like she wasn't sure how long she was supposed to hold on. "You look good, Grandma," she said, though her eyes drifted away quickly, already searching for her phone. We sat at the table, the three of them across from me. I served the pie. No one said anything for a moment. Then Melissa took a small bite and nodded. "It's sweet. Not delicious. Not I missed this. Just sweet." Ethan didn't even look up. He was scrolling through emails. "You've been busy," I asked gently, trying to start a conversation. "Always," he said. "Work doesn't slow down." I nodded, folding my hands in my lap. "I heard you got promoted," I added. "Yeah," he said, finally glancing at me. "Regional director now." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely proud. "Your father would have been—" "Dad worked hard for that," Ethan interrupted. "He taught me everything." Something in his tone made me pause. "I'm sure he did," I said quietly. Melissa set her fork down. Thomas was an incredible man, she added. Very respected. I felt a strange tightening in my chest. Yes, I said. He was. But the way they spoke about him, it was always like I wasn't part of that life. Like I had just been there in the background, invisible. Sophie finally spoke up. Dad says Grandpa was involved in some pretty important things. Ethan nodded. Military connections, strategic work. Not the kind of stuff you talk about casually. He said it with a kind of pride I hadn't heard in years. And you, Mom? He added, almost as an afterthought, you stayed home, right? The room went quiet. I could feel Melissa watching me. Sophie, too. I swallowed. Yes, I said slowly. I was home most of the time. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Ethan leaned back in his chair. That's what I always tell people, he said. My dad built everything we have. Mom kept the house running. He smiled slightly like he was being generous, like he was giving me credit, but it felt like something else, like I was being reduced to a footnote in my own life. Melissa gave a small laugh. Well, someone had to do it, she said. I nodded again, even though my hands were starting to tremble under the table. Sophie looked between us. Grandma, did you ever want to do something else? She asked. Her question caught me off guard. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time that afternoon. There was curiosity in her eyes, not judgment, not yet. I hesitated. Ethan cut in before I could answer. Mom wasn't really the adventurous type, he said, lightly. She liked things simple. Simple. The word echoed in my head. I lowered my gaze to the table. That's not a bad thing, Melissa added quickly. Some people just aren't meant for complicated lives. I don't know why that hurt more than the rest. Maybe because it sounded so final, so certain, like they had already decided who I was and there was no room for anything else. I pushed my plate away slightly. I think I'll make some coffee, I said, needing a moment to breathe. No one stopped me. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. Simple. Forgettable. Nothing remarkable. Was that really how my own family saw me? Or had they been told something that made them believe it? I closed my eyes for a moment. There was a time long ago when I thought silence was the right choice, that protecting my family meant burying parts of myself. But standing there, listening to their voices echo in my head, I began to wonder if that silence had cost me more than I ever realized. When I returned to the table, the conversation had already moved on something about Sophie's college plans. No one noticed the tears I had wiped away. No one asked if I was okay. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just overlooked. I was rewritten. My life, my past, my choices reduced to something smaller, safer, easier for them to understand. Or maybe easier for someone else to control. I sat down quietly, listening, nodding when appropriate. But inside, something had shifted. A question had taken root, and it wouldn't let go. If I was really just a woman who never did anything remarkable, then why did it feel like I was the only one remembering a life they refused to see? That night after they left, I didn't clean the dishes right away. I just sat there. The house felt even quieter than usual, like the walls themselves had been listening. And now, they were holding on to every word that had been said at that table. Simple. Forgettable. Never did anything remarkable. I repeated the words in my head over and over, as if saying them enough times might make them feel less sharp. It didn't. I finally stood up and began clearing the plates. The pie was barely touched. I wrapped it carefully, even though I knew no one would come back for it. As I rinsed the dishes, my hands moved on their own, guided by years of routine. But my mind was somewhere else, back there, in a place I hadn't allowed myself to visit in decades. I dried my hands slowly and walked into the living room. There's an old wooden chest tucked beneath the window, one I hadn't opened in years, not since Thomas told me to leave the past where it belonged. I knelt in front of it. For a long moment, I just stared at the brass latch. Some things are better left alone, Jeremiah. I could almost hear his voice saying, but for the first time, I wasn't sure I agreed. Before I could open it, the sound of my phone ringing startled me. I hesitated, then stood and walked over to the kitchen counter. The name on the screen made my breath catch. Helen Carter. I hadn't seen her in over 30 years. Hello, I answered, my voice more fragile than I expected. Jeremiah, she said, her voice warm but edged with something urgent. It's me, Helen. I know, I said softly. I didn't expect. To see me again? She finished gently. Yeah, I figured. There was a pause. I'm sorry about earlier, she said. I shouldn't have said anything in front of your family. My grip tightened around the phone. No, I said after a moment. Maybe you should have. Another pause. Longer this time. Do they really not know? Helen asked quietly. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes. They know what they were told, I said. That's not the same thing. Helen exhaled slowly. After everything you did, I just can't wrap my head around that. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure I could either. Jeremiah, she continued, her tone shifting, becoming more serious. You need to see something. My heart skipped. What do you mean? I went to the Veterans Hall last week, she said. In Dayton. They've been updating records, recognizing people who slipped through the cracks. A strange chill ran down my spine, and I asked, And your name is there, she said. I froze. What? Your name, she repeated. Jeremiah Whitaker. It's carved into their recognition wall. I let out a small, breathless laugh. That's not possible. It is, she said firmly. I stood there and looked at it myself. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. No, that doesn't make any sense. I was never officially part of anything. You were there, Helen said. You were in Da Nang. You were in that station with me. You don't have to wear a uniform to matter. My chest tightened at the name. Da Nang. Just hearing it again felt like opening a door I had spent years holding shut. You remember that night? She asked quietly. I didn't want to, but memory has a way of slipping in through the cracks whether you invite it or not. The smell of smoke, the sound of shouting, the weight of bodies I dragged through the dark. I remember, I whispered. Then you know, Helen said. What you did wasn't small. It wasn't simple. And it sure as hell wasn't forgettable. Tears blurred my vision. Then why does my own son think I've done nothing? I asked, my voice breaking. Helen didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was careful. Because someone made sure that's the version he grew up with. The words landed heavier than I expected. You think Thomas... I started, then stopped. I couldn't even finish the thought. I don't know what Thomas told him, Helen said. But I do know what happened back then didn't disappear. It was documented, reported. Then where is it? I asked. Why isn't it in any official record I've ever seen? That's exactly why you need to come with me, she said. Tomorrow. I'll take you to the hall. You need to see it for yourself. I sank into the chair at the kitchen table. Tomorrow. The word felt too close, too sudden. I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted. Jeremiah Helen said gently, You've spent decades carrying this alone. Don't you think it's time you at least looked at the truth? I stared at the empty plate in front of me, at the faint crumbs of a pie no one wanted, at the life I had quietly accepted. And for the first time, I felt something shift. Not just pain, not just regret, something sharper. Something that felt almost like anger. I'll go, I said finally. Helen let out a soft breath. Good. I'll pick you up at 10. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the phone still in my hand. My name, carved into a wall, recognized, remembered. It didn't match the life I had been living, and that frightened me. Because if it was true, then everything I had been told, everything my family believed about me, was built on something else. Something incomplete. Or worse, something intentionally hidden. I stood slowly and walked back into the living room. The wooden chest was still there, waiting. This time, I didn't hesitate. I knelt down, lifted the latch, and opened it. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a few carefully folded pieces of fabric. My fingers trembled as I reached in and pulled out a photograph. It was faded, edges worn, but I recognized the place instantly. A medical tent, dust in the air, chaos just outside the frame. And there I was, younger, stronger, covered in dirt and exhaustion, but standing. Alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I stared at that woman for a long time. The woman my son had never met. The woman my husband had asked me to forget. The woman whose name somehow had survived even when everything else had been buried. I pressed the photo to my chest, my heart pounding. Tomorrow I would go to that hall. Tomorrow I would stand in front of that wall. And maybe for the first time in decades, I would finally find out who I really was. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the same images kept finding their way, back dust in the air, the sharp crack of something breaking in the distance, voices shouting in a language I didn't fully understand, and the unmistakable sound of fear. Real fear. The kind that doesn't ask permission before it takes over your body. By morning, I was already dressed before the sun had fully risen. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, studying the woman staring back at me. Gray hair, thin lines around my eyes, shoulders slightly bent from time and quiet endurance. Not the woman from the photograph. Not the woman Helen remembered. But maybe still her. I picked up the photo from the night before and slipped it carefully into my purse. I didn't know why. Maybe I needed proof. Proof that I hadn't imagined it all. Helen arrived right on time. Her car pulled into the driveway, and for a moment I just stood by the window watching her step out. She looked older, of course. We both did, but there was something about the way she moved that hadn't changed. Purpose, confidence, the kind of presence that reminded me of who she used to be and who I used to stand beside. When I opened the door, she smiled. Still punctual, she said softly. Still stubborn, I replied. We both laughed, but it was brief. There was too much weight hanging between us for anything light to last long. The drive to the Veterans Hall was quiet at first. Dayton looked the same as it always had. Small shops, familiar intersections, people going about their routines without realizing how many stories were hidden behind the faces they passed. After a few minutes, Helen glanced at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my hands were clenched tightly in my lap. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel," I admitted. "That's fair," she said. "You've spent a long time not feeling this part of your life." I turned my head toward the window. "That wasn't entirely my choice," I said quietly. Helen didn't argue. She didn't need to. We both knew that. When we pulled into the parking lot, my heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The building wasn't large, simple brick walls, a faded American flag hanging near the entrance, a sign that read, Dayton Veterans Recognition Hall. Nothing about it looked extraordinary. And yet something about standing there made my legs feel weak. "This is it," Helen said gently. I didn't move right away. "What if it's a mistake?" I asked. "It's not," she said. "I checked 3 times. And if it is," I pressed. "If I walk in there and my name isn't there, then what?" Helen reached over and placed her hand on mine. "Then we walk out," she said. "Together." I took a deep breath, then another, and finally I opened the car door. Each step toward the entrance felt heavier than the last, not because of the distance, but because of what it might mean. Inside, the air was cool and still. There was a quiet respect in the space, like a church, but without the words. Just history, memory, presence. Walls lined with photographs, plaques, names. So many names. People who had been seen, recognized, remembered. I felt small walking past them, like I didn't belong there. Helen stayed close beside me. "It's in the back," she said softly. We walked slowly, the sound of our footsteps echoing lightly against the floor. I could feel my breath getting shallower with each step. And then we turned the corner. And I saw it. A long wooden wall, polished but aged, filled with carved names. My eyes scanned it quickly at first. Too quickly. I didn't see it. My chest tightened. "I told you," I whispered, already stepping back. "It's not here." "Jeremiah," Helen said firmly, placing her hand on my arm. "Look again." I swallowed hard and stepped closer. Slower this time. My eyes moved from one name to the next, and then they stopped. There it was, clear, unmistakable. Jeremiah Whitaker. The world around me seemed to fall away. The noise, the air, the space, everything faded until it was just me and that name. My name, carved into wood, permanent, real. I reached out my fingers, trembling as they brushed against the letters. I could feel the grooves beneath my skin. Proof. "I told you," Helen whispered behind me. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because something inside me had just broken open. Not pain, not exactly. Something deeper. Something I had kept locked away for so long that I had almost forgotten it existed. Recognition. Not from my family. Not from the people who were supposed to know me best. But from strangers. From history. From truth. "Excuse me," a voice said, gently behind us. I turned slowly. An older man stood a few feet away, dressed neatly. A small name badge pinned to his jacket. "Leonard Brooks," he said, offering a hand. "I manage the hall." I stared at him, still trying to steady myself. "You're Jeremiah Whitaker, aren't you?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." A warm, almost relieved smile spread across his face. "I've been hoping you'd come," he said. My breath caught. "Hoping," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "We've been trying to locate you for years." Years. The word echoed in my mind. "I don't understand," I said. He gestured toward the wall. "Your name was submitted for recognition over 3 decades ago," he explained. "It took time to verify everything, but once we did, there was no question." My hands tightened at my sides. "Verify what?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He looked at me carefully. "Your actions in Da Nang," he said. "The night of the explosion at the medical station." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You saved 6 men," he continued. "Pulled them out yourself, one by one, under fire." Helen squeezed my arm gently. I shook my head instinctively. "No, I just did what anyone would do," I said. Mr. Brooks smiled softly. "No, ma'am," he said. "Most people wouldn't have gone back in after the first one." My chest tightened. Because he was right. I remembered that night. The heat, the fear. The moment I had almost stopped, almost turned away, and then didn't. Those men wrote reports, he added, statements, letters. They made sure someone knew what you did. Then why? I started, my voice breaking. "Why did it disappear?" Mr. Brooks' expression shifted slightly. That he said slowly is something we're still trying to fully understand. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about being forgotten. This was about being erased. And as I stood there, staring at my name carved into that wall, I realized something that sent a chill through my entire body. Someone had tried to make sure I was never remembered. I didn't realize how hard I was breathing until Helen gently touched my shoulder. "Jeremiah," she said softly, "sit down." I hadn't even noticed my legs trembling. Mr. Brooks guided us toward a small bench near the wall, his expression calm but watchful, like he had seen this moment before, people discovering pieces of themselves they thought were lost. I sat slowly, my eyes still fixed on my name. It felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else, someone braver, someone stronger. "Take your time," Mr. Brooks said. "There's no rush." But that wasn't true, because something inside me had already started moving, questions, memories, doubts, all pushing forward at once. "You said there were reports," I finally said, my voice still unsteady. "Statements, letters." "Yes," he nodded. "From the men you saved, and from medical staff who were there." I turned to Helen. "You never told me that," I whispered. She looked down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "We weren't allowed to talk about it," she said quietly. "Not after everything that happened?" The words settled heavily between us. "What do you mean?" I asked. Helen hesitated. Mr. Brooks stepped in gently. "There were irregularities," he said carefully. "Documents that didn't match. Accounts that were altered." A cold chill spread through my chest. "Altered," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "Some of the official reports credited actions to someone else." My stomach dropped. "Someone else?" I asked, though something deep inside me already knew the answer. Mr. Brooks exchanged a brief glance with Helen. Then he said the name. "Colonel Richard Whitaker." The air left my lungs. For a moment I couldn't hear anything but the sound of my own heartbeat. Richard, Thomas's older brother. The man who had always carried himself like the most important person in every room. The man who had barely acknowledged me unless it suited him. "That doesn't make any sense," I said, shaking my head. "He wasn't even there." "That's what the verified accounts indicate," Mr. Brooks said. But the official record, at least the one that circulated publicly, placed him in a leadership role during that incident. I let out a hollow laugh. Leadership role, I said. I was the one inside that tent. I was the one. My voice caught. Because suddenly, I wasn't sitting in that quiet hall anymore. I was back there. The night, everything changed. The ground shaking beneath my feet. The sharp, deafening blast that split the air open. The medical station, what was left of it, half-collapsed smoke pouring through the torn canvas. People screaming, calling for help. I remembered the moment I froze, just for a second, long enough to realize I could run. I could leave. No one would blame me. No one would even know. And then I heard a voice. "Help, please." It was weak, barely there, but it was enough. I moved, without thinking, without hesitation. I ran back in. I remembered the heat, the way it burned my lungs with every breath, the weight of the first soldier I dragged out, his arm hanging limp, his face barely visible through the dirt and blood. I laid him down outside, gasping for air. I could have stopped. I should have. But I didn't. I went back in, again and again. Each time telling myself, just one more. Until there were no more voices left. Until my body finally gave out. I came back to the present with a sharp inhale. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I didn't think anyone saw, I whispered. They did. Helen said firmly. We all did. Then why didn't anyone say anything? I asked, my voice rising slightly. Why didn't it matter? Helen's expression softened, but there was pain behind it. We tried, she said, but things changed quickly after that. Mr. Brooks nodded. There were higher-level interventions, he said carefully. Records reassigned. Narratives adjusted. By who I demanded. He hesitated. I can't say with absolute certainty, he replied. But the Whitaker name appears repeatedly in the chain of revisions. Of course it did. A bitter realization settled over me. Thomas, Richard, the family I married into, the family I trusted. You're telling me, I said slowly, trying to steady my voice, that my own husband's family took what I did and gave it to someone else. Mr. Brooks didn't answer directly. But he didn't need to. The silence said enough. I leaned back against the bench, my chest rising and falling too fast. For years, I had believed my silence was a choice, a sacrifice, something I did to protect the people I loved. But now, it felt like something else. Like I had been guided into that silence. Encouraged. Maybe even pressured. Thomas told me it would bring trouble. I murmured more to myself than anyone else. Helen looked at me sharply. He said that, she asked. I nodded slowly. After I came back, I said, he told me it was better to let it go, that talking about it could cause problems for his family. Helen's jaw tightened. Of course it would, she said bitterly. Because if you talked, the truth would come out. I closed my eyes. All those years, all those moments, I stayed quiet. Every time someone asked about my past, and I brushed it off. Every time I let Ethan believe I had done nothing. Every time I allowed myself to shrink to fit the version of me they had created. I thought I was protecting them, but now I saw it clearly. I wasn't protecting them. I was protecting a lie, and it wasn't even mine. I need to see those records, I said, suddenly opening my eyes. Mr. Brooks nodded. I thought you might, he said. He stood and motioned for us to follow him. There's a file we've been compiling, he explained. Original statements, recovered documents, cross-referenced accounts. We walked down a narrow hallway, the air feeling heavier with each step. At the end, he unlocked a small office and stepped inside. On the desk sat a thick folder. Worn, handled many times. He picked it up carefully and placed it in front of me. "This is everything we've been able to verify so far," he said. My hands hovered over it. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it, because I knew, once I did, he picked it up carefully and placed it in front of me. "This is everything we've been able to verify so far," he said. My hands hovered over it. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it, because I knew. Once I did, there would be no going back. The truth wouldn't just be something I felt anymore. It would be something I saw. Something undeniable. Something that would change everything. I took a deep breath. Then slowly, I opened the file. The first page I saw had my name on it. Not carved in wood this time. Typed. Official. Black ink against aged paper. Jeremiah Whitaker, civilian medical volunteer. My breath caught in my throat as I traced the letters with my eyes, afraid that if I blinked, they might disappear. "Keep going," Mr. Brooks said gently. My fingers trembled as I turned the page. The next document was a statement. Signed. Dated. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. She went back in after the explosion. I saw her do it. Most of us were already pulling out, but she kept going. Private Daniel K. Lawson. I swallowed hard. Daniel. I remembered him. Barely older than a boy, really. Always nervous, always trying to smile through it. I remembered dragging him out, his leg badly injured, his hands gripping my arm so tightly it bruised for days. "You're safe now," I had told him. I didn't know if I believed it at the time, but he had. And now, decades later, he remembered me. I turned another page, another statement. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be here. That's the truth. She didn't stop, even when the structure was collapsing. Sergeant Franklin Hayes. My chest tightened. Franklin. Helen had mentioned him before. But seeing his name here, reading his words, it felt different, real, heavy. I pressed my lips together, fighting the sudden wave of emotion rising in my throat. "There's more," Helen said quietly beside me. I nodded, unable to speak. Page after page, testimonies, names, voices from the past, all telling the same story. A story I had tried so hard to forget. A story that had been taken from me and rewritten. And then I froze. The next document wasn't a statement. It was a report. Official military formatting, stamped, signed. But the name at the top, Colonel Richard Whitaker. My fingers went cold. "No," I whispered. I read the first line. During the incident at the Da Nang Medical Station, Colonel Richard Whitaker demonstrated exceptional leadership by coordinating evacuation efforts and ensuring the safety of multiple personnel. My vision blurred. That wasn't what happened. That wasn't even close. "He wasn't there," I said, my voice shaking. "He wasn't anywhere near that station." Mr. Brooks stepped closer. "We know," he said. "Then how is this here?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because this," he said carefully, "is the version that was submitted through official channels." I stared at the page, my heart pounding harder with every second. "They took it," I said. "They took what happened and gave it to him." Helen's jaw tightened. "It wasn't just taken," she said. "It was replaced." The word echoed in my head. Replaced. Like I had never been there. Like I had never mattered. I flipped through more pages faster now, my hands no longer careful. There were annotations, crossed out sections, handwritten notes, discrepancies marked in red. And then I saw it, a report that had been partially erased. My name barely visible beneath a layer of correction fluid that had yellowed with time. I leaned in closer, my breath shallow. Jeremiah Whitaker, I read softly. They tried to remove you completely, Mr. Brooks said, but they didn't finish the job, Helen added. I felt something inside me shift again, but this time it wasn't just pain. It wasn't just confusion. It was something sharper, something stronger. Anger, not loud, not explosive, but deep, steady, the kind that doesn't fade. Why? I asked, my voice low. Why would they do this? Mr. Brooks hesitated. Influence, he said finally. Reputation. Power. Your brother-in-law was already building a name for himself. A story like this, it would elevate him. And I gestured vaguely at the file. What, convenient? No, Helen said firmly. You were inconvenient. I looked at her. You were a civilian, she continued. A woman, not part of the official structure. They could push you aside without too many questions. The words hit harder than I expected. Because they made sense, too much sense. I closed the file slowly, my hands resting on top of it. For years, I had believed my silence was something noble, something necessary. But now, I saw it for what it really was. It wasn't just silence, it was erasure, and I had helped them do it. Does anyone else know? I asked quietly. Mr. Brooks nodded. A few people, he said. Historians, veterans, archivists. We've been trying to correct the record, but without you, it's been difficult. Without me, I repeated. Yes, he said. You're the missing piece, the living proof. I let out a slow breath. The living proof. The words felt heavy, because they came with something I hadn't expected. Responsibility. I looked back toward the hallway, the direction of the wall, where my name was carved. For the first time, I didn't feel like I didn't belong there. I felt like I had been kept away. Jeremiah, Helen said gently, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I nodded slowly. But deep down, I knew something had already changed. I do, I said. They both looked at me. I spent decades letting other people decide what my story was. I continued. I let my own son believe I was nothing. My voice cracked slightly. But that ends now. Silence filled the room. Not uncomfortable, just heavy, like something important had just been set in motion. What are you going to do? Mr. Brooks asked. I hesitated, because the truth was I didn't fully know yet, but I knew where it had to start. My family, I said. Helen frowned slightly. Jeremiah, they deserve to know the truth, I said. Even if they don't believe it at first. And if they don't? She asked carefully. I looked down at the file, at the names, at the proof. Then I looked back up. Then at least I'll know I finally told it. Mr. Brooks nodded slowly. If you're willing, he said, we'd also like to formally recognize you. A ceremony, public acknowledgement. The idea made my chest tighten again, not from fear, but from something else, something unfamiliar. Being seen. I'll think about it, I said honestly. That's all we ask, he replied. I picked up the photograph from my purse, the one I had found the night before. The younger version of me stared back. Tired, dirty, but unbroken. For so long I had felt like that woman was gone, lost somewhere in the years of silence. But standing there holding that photo surrounded by proof that she had existed, I realized something. She hadn't disappeared. She had been buried. And now she was starting to come back. I closed the file gently, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready to face it. I didn't go home right away. Even after we left the office, after I closed the file and thanked Mr. Brooks, after Helen walked me back toward the car, I just stopped. "I need a minute," I told her quietly. She nodded understanding immediately. "We'll be right here." I turned back toward the main hall, toward the wall. My wall. The space felt different now. Before I had walked through it like a stranger, careful, unsure, almost apologetic for being there. Now I walked slower, not out of fear, but because I wanted to take it in. Every name carved into that wood represented a life that had been seen, a moment that mattered, a truth that survived. And mine was among them. I stood in front of it again. Jeremiah Whitaker. I reached out, touching it once more. This time, my hand didn't tremble, but my heart did. Not from doubt, from something deeper, grief. For all the years I had spent believing I was invisible. For every time I let someone dismiss me without question. For every moment I swallowed the truth because I thought it didn't matter anymore. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I wasn't even sure who I was apologizing to. Myself. That younger woman in the photograph. Or maybe the version of me that had waited all this time to be acknowledged. "You don't have anything to apologize for." I turned. A man stood a few feet behind me, older, mid-70s maybe, strong posture despite the years. His eyes fixed on me with something I couldn't quite place. Recognition. "You're Jeremiah Whitaker," he said. It wasn't a question. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." He took a slow step forward. "I wasn't sure you were real," he said. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, his voice tightening just a little. "I've been telling people your name for 35 years and no one ever believed me." My breath caught. "Who are you?" I asked. He stopped just in front of me. "Franklin Hayes," he said. The name hit me like a sudden gust of wind. The same name I had just read in the file. The same name attached to that statement. The man I had pulled from the wreckage. I stared at him. "You're Sergeant Hayes," I said slowly. He gave a small nod. "Retired a long time ago," he said. "But yeah, that's me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Because how do you bridge decades of silence in a single moment? "I thought you didn't make it," I said finally. His lips curved into a faint smile. "Yeah," he said. "A lot of people thought that." I felt my chest tighten. "I remember your leg." I said, "It was bad." "It was." He agreed. "Lost part of it. Took a long time to walk right again." He shifted his weight slightly, and I noticed the subtle stiffness in his movement. "But I'm here," he added. "Because of you." The words settled heavily between us. "I didn't know," I said. "I didn't know any of you survived." "That's because they didn't want you to know," he replied. I swallowed. "Did you try to find me?" I asked. He let out a soft, tired laugh. "More times than I can count," he said. wrote letters, filed statements, talked to anyone who would listen, and I asked, and every time he said, his voice hardening slightly, I was told I must have been mistaken. A sharp pain twisted in my chest. Mistaken? I repeated. Yeah, he said. They said it was Colonel Whitaker who led the evacuation, that I was probably confused in the chaos. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course they did. I wasn't confused, he continued, his voice steady now. I remember exactly who pulled me out of that fire. I looked at him again, really looked, and suddenly I saw it. Not just the older man standing in front of me, but the young soldier he had been. Frightened, bleeding, clinging to life, and trusting me to get him out. You kept going, he said quietly, even when everyone else backed off. I shook my head slightly. I was scared, I admitted. Of course you were, he said. That's what makes it matter. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't think anyone saw, I whispered. I saw, he said firmly. Every time you came back in, I thought that was it, that you weren't coming out again. I let out a shaky breath. And you still went, he added. We stood there in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just full of everything that had been left unsaid for far too long. I'm sorry it took this long, he said. For what? For you to be recognized? He replied. For the truth to catch up. I nodded slowly. So am I. He glanced at the wall, then back at me. They tried to bury it, he said. But things like that, they don't stay buried forever. I thought about the file, the altered reports, the erased name. You fought for this, I said. I fought for what was right, he corrected gently. His words stayed with me, because for the first time, I realized something important. This wasn't just my story. It wasn't just about me being forgotten. It was about truth being taken and slowly, painfully finding its way back. Are there others? I asked. Some, he said. A few of the guys made it. Not all of them stayed in touch, but we never forgot. My throat tightened. They remember me? I asked quietly. He looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. Every single one of us, he said. I turned back to the wall, to my name, and suddenly it didn't feel like just mine anymore. It felt like a piece of something bigger, a moment that had mattered to more people than I ever realized. Thank you, I said softly. He shook his head. No, he said. Thank you. Another silence settled between us, but this one felt different, lighter, like something had finally been set right, or at least started to be. I'm going to tell my family, I said after a moment. He studied me for a second. That won't be easy, he said. I know, I replied. They've been living with a different version of the story for a long time. I know that too. He nodded slowly. But you're still going to do it. Yes, I said. Because now, I understand something I hadn't before. Silence oozed something I hadn't before. Silence doesn't protect the truth. It protects the lie. And I had spent enough years doing that. Franklin gave me a small approving nod. Well, he said, if you need someone to back you up, you know where to find me. I smiled faintly. I might take you up on that. He extended his hand. I took it. His grip was firm. Real. A connection that had survived decades of distance and denial. "Don't disappear again," he said. "I won't," I promised. And for the first time, I meant it. As I walked back toward Helen, something inside me felt steadier, stronger. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth was no longer hidden. And neither was I. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Helen kept glancing over at me like she was trying to read something in my face that I hadn't yet figured out how to say out loud. "You don't have to rush into anything," she said gently as we stopped at a red light. "I know," I replied, but that wasn't entirely true, because something inside me had already started moving, and it wasn't going to slow down. "I've spent most of my life not saying anything," I added quietly. "I don't think I can do that anymore." Helen nodded, her expression soft but understanding. "That's not a bad thing," she said. We pulled into my driveway a few minutes later. For a moment, neither of us moved. The house looked the same as it always had. Still. Silent. But it didn't feel the same, because I wasn't the same woman who had walked out of it that morning. "Call me if you need anything," Helen said as I reached for the door. "I will," I promised. And for once, I meant that too. Inside the house greeted me with its familiar quiet, but instead of comfort, it felt hollow. Like it had been holding a version of me that no longer fit. I set my purse down slowly and walked into the living room. The wooden chest was still open, the photograph still sitting on top. The younger me staring back like she had been waiting. "I saw it," I whispered. "I saw your name." I picked up the photo, running my fingers along its worn edges. For so many years, I had treated that part of my life like something distant, something separate. But now, it was here. Real, undeniable, and it demanded to be acknowledged. I sat down on the couch and reached for the phone. My hands hesitated for a moment over the screen. Then I pressed Ethan's number. It rang longer than usual. Just when I thought it might go to voicemail, he answered. "Hey, Mom." His tone was neutral, busy, like always. "Hi, Ethan," I said. There was a pause. "You okay?" he asked. "You don't usually call during the day. I need to talk to you," I said. Another pause. "About what?" he asked. I swallowed. "About something important," I replied. He sighed lightly, and I could hear papers shifting on the other end. "I've got meetings this afternoon," he said. "Can it wait?" That familiar feeling crept in again. The one that told me to say yes, to step back, to not make things inconvenient. But this time, I didn't listen to it. "No," I said. The word felt strange on my tongue. Firm, unapologetic. "I need you to come over," I continued. "Tonight." Silence. Then, "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, a hint of irritation slipping into his voice. "I'll explain when you get here," I said. Another pause. Longer this time. "I don't know if I can make it," he said. "Melissa and I have—" "This isn't about your schedule," I interrupted. The words surprised even me, but I didn't take them back. "This is about something you need to hear." I added, my voice steady now. There was a shift on the other end of the line. A tension. Ethan wasn't used to this. To me, pushing back. "All right," he said finally. "Well, come by?" "Just you," I said. That stopped him. What he asked. "I want to talk to you," I repeated. "Not everyone, just you." He exhaled sharply. "Fine," he said. "You'll be there around 6. "Thank you," I replied, but he had already hung up. I lowered the phone slowly. My heart was racing, not from fear, from something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Resolve. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. The same table from yesterday, the same chairs, the same space where I had sat quietly while my life was reduced to something small. I placed the photograph in the center of the table. Then I went back to the living room and retrieved the folder Mr. Brooks had given me copies from. Carefully, I laid out the documents, statements, letters, proof, each piece telling a story that had been hidden for far too long. I didn't know how Ethan would react. I didn't know if he would believe me. But I knew one thing for certain. He was going to hear the truth. The clock ticked slowly as the afternoon passed. Every minute felt heavier than the last. I found myself pacing, sitting, standing again, rehearsing words in my head that never quite felt right. How do you tell your own child that everything they believe about you is wrong, that the story they were raised on was built on someone else's lie? At exactly 6 o'clock, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My chest tightened. This was it. I walked to the door before he could knock and opened it. Ethan stood there, hands in his pockets, his expression guarded. "Mom," he said. "Come in," I replied. He stepped inside, glancing around like he always did. Nothing had changed. Except everything had. He followed me into the kitchen. And then he saw it. The photograph. The documents spread across the table. "What is all this?" he asked, frowning. "Sit down," I said. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair. I sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of the years between us. All the things I had never said. All the things he had never questioned. I went to the Veterans Hall today I began. His expression didn't change. "Okay," he said slowly. "My name is there," I continued. "On the recognition wall." He blinked. "What?" "I know what you've been told," I said. "About my life, about what I did or didn't do." He leaned back slightly, confusion starting to creep into his features. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I slid the photograph toward him. "Look at this," I said. He picked it up, studying it. "That's you?" he asked. "Yes." He frowned. "Where is this?" "Vietnam," I said. The word hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. His eyes snapped up to mine. "What?" "I was there," I said, "during the war, as a medical volunteer." He stared at me like he was trying to process something impossible. "That doesn't make any sense," he said. "Dad told me you stayed here, that you—" "I know what he told you," I interrupted softly. I pushed the folder toward him. "Read it." He hesitated, then slowly he opened it, and as his eyes moved across the pages, I watched something begin to crack. Ethan didn't speak for a long time. The only sound in the room was the quiet rustle of paper as he turned each page slower now than before. Careful, focused. Like he was afraid he might miss something important if he moved too quickly. I watched his face, every shift, every flicker of emotion. At first, there was disbelief. That was expected. Then confusion. Then something else began to settle in, something heavier. Doubt. Not about me, about everything he had been told. This he said, finally, his voice low, almost uncertain. This doesn't make sense. I didn't interrupt. I let him keep going. He picked up one of the statements, reading it again more closely this time. They all say the same thing, he murmured. That you were there. That you went back in. His eyes moved across the page, his brow tightening. That you saved them. I nodded slowly. Yes. He shook his head like he was trying to push the idea away. But Dad said, I know what your father said. I replied softly. He looked up at me then, really looked. And for the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. My whole life, he said slowly. I was told you stayed here, that you didn't want anything to do with that world. I didn't want anything to do with what happened after, I said. That's different. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? I took a breath. It means I came back, I said, and your father asked me not to talk about it. Ethan's expression sharpened. Why? Because he said it would cause problems, I answered. What kind of problems? He pressed. I gestured toward the folder. The kind you're reading about now. He looked back down at the papers. His eyes landed on the report, the one with Richard's name at the top. I saw it the moment it clicked. His jaw tightened. That's Uncle Richard, he said. Yes, he was credited for this, he asked. Yes, but he wasn't there. He continued. No. Silence filled the room again. But this time, it was different. Tense. Uncomfortable. Like something was unraveling right in front of him, and he didn't know how to stop it. That doesn't make any sense, he said again, but this time it sounded weaker. It doesn't, I agreed. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Dad wouldn't lie about something like this, he said almost defensively. I didn't answer right away. Because this was the moment. The one I had been preparing for all afternoon. The one I had spent decades avoiding. I think your father? I began slowly choosing each word carefully, made a decision. Ethan looked at me. What kind of decision to protect his family? I said. That doesn't explain this, he said, gesturing to the documents. No, I said quietly. It doesn't excuse it either. He stared at me, waiting. I could see it now. The tension between what he believed and what he was seeing. I didn't talk about it, I continued, because I thought staying quiet was the right thing to do. For who, he asked. The question hit harder than I expected. I held his gaze. For all of you, I said. His expression shifted. Something in that answer landed. You think this protected me? He asked, his voice rising slightly. I thought it would, I said. It didn't, he replied sharply. I nodded. I know that now. He stood up suddenly, pacing a few steps across the kitchen. He stopped, struggling to find the word. This is insane. I stayed seated, letting him move, letting him feel it. All these years he continued shaking his head. All these years I thought I knew who you were. His words weren't angry. Not exactly. They were broken. I thought you were someone who chose not to do more, he said. I swallowed. I know. And now you're telling me you did something like this. He gestured again to the papers. And just never said anything. Yes. Why? He demanded. There it was. The question that had lived between us for years. I took a deep breath. Because I was told it would hurt this family, I said, and I believed that. He stopped pacing, turned back toward me. And what about you? He asked. Did it hurt you? I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I hadn't allowed myself to think about that. Not fully. Yes, I said finally. The word came out quieter than I expected, but it carried weight. Ethan stared at me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes moved to the photograph on the table. He picked it up slowly. This is really you, he asked again. Yes. He studied it closely. You look, he hesitated, different, I offered. He nodded. Stronger, he said. The word hung in the air. I felt something shift inside my chest. Because that wasn't something I had heard from him before. Not about me. I said. His grip on the photo tightened slightly. Why didn't I ever know this? He asked. Because I didn't tell you, I said. And Dad didn't either, he added. No, I said. He set the photo back down more carefully this time. So, what now? He asked. The question lingered between us. Because it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about what came next. I'm not asking you to believe everything right away, I said. I know this is a lot. He nodded slightly. But I am asking you to look at it. I continued. Really, look at it. And decide for yourself what you think is true. He exhaled slowly. I don't know what to think right now, he admitted. That's okay, I said. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't as heavy, not as suffocating. It felt open, like something had finally been said that couldn't be taken back. I met one of the men I saved today, I said quietly. Ethan looked up. What? His name is Franklin Hayes, I said. He was there. He remembers everything. Ethan's expression shifted again. Is he still alive? He asked. Yes. And he said it was you, he pressed. Yes. He looked down at the table, at the papers, at the photograph, at the version of me he had known his entire life, and the one sitting in front of him now. They're going to hold a ceremony, I added, at the Veterans Hall. His head snapped up. A ceremony to officially recognize what happened, I said. He stared at me, and for a moment, I couldn't read his expression. I don't know if I can just show up and act like I understand all of this, he said. I'm not asking you to, I replied. Then what are you asking? He said. I met his eyes. For you to come, I said, and listen. He hesitated, long enough that I thought he might say no. Then finally, he nodded. I'll come, he said. Relief washed over me, quiet but steady. Thank you, I said. He didn't respond right away, but as he gathered the papers, carefully placing them back into the folder, I noticed something small, something subtle. He wasn't pushing them away anymore. He was holding on to them, and for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally found a place to begin. After Ethan left that night, the house felt quieter than it ever had before. Not peaceful, not calm, just unsettled, like something had been opened that couldn't be closed again. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after the front door shut behind him. The folder was still on the table, the photograph still resting beside it. But now they didn't feel like hidden truths anymore. They felt like evidence, like something that was about to be tested. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I drifted off, I found myself back in that same moment. Ethan's face when he realized something didn't add up. The way his voice changed when he said, "Dad wouldn't lie," and the way it changed again when he started to doubt that. That was the part that stayed with me, because it meant something had shifted. Not completely, but enough. The next morning, I was halfway through making coffee when my phone rang. "Ethan." I stared at the screen for a second before answering. "Hello, Mom," he said. His voice sounded different, not angry, not defensive, tired. "I didn't sleep," he added. "Neither did I." I admitted. There was a pause. "I kept reading it," he said. "The file?" "Yeah," he replied. I took pictures of some of the pages. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge slightly. And I asked carefully. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me still feels like there has to be some explanation, something that makes all of this make sense." "I understand," I said. "But another part," he hesitated. "Another part keeps going back to those statements." My chest tightened. "What about them?" "They're too specific," he said. "Different names, different details. But they all describe the same thing." "Yes," I said quietly. "And they all describe you," he added. I closed my eyes briefly. "Yes." Another pause. "Then I'm going to talk to Dad," he said. The words landed heavier than I expected. When I asked, "Today," he said. "I can't just sit on this." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Okay, you should be there," he added. That surprised me. "You want me there?" I asked. "I think you need to be," he said. "Because if this is real, if any of this is true, then he needs to say it in front of you." My grip tightened slightly on the counter, because I knew what that meant. Confrontation, not quiet, not controlled, real. "I'll be there," I said. "Good," he replied. "I'll call you when I'm heading over." The line went quiet after that, but the weight of what was coming next stayed with me. I spent the next few hours moving through the house without really seeing it, cleaning things that didn't need cleaning, straightening things that weren't out of place, anything to keep my hands busy. Because my mind was already there, back in that house, back in that conversation, with Thomas. By the time Ethan called again, my heart was already racing. "I'm on my way," he said. "You ready?" "No," I answered honestly, "but he'll be there." His house was only 15 minutes away. But it felt longer. Every mile felt heavier, like I was driving towards something I had spent decades avoiding. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan's car was already there. So was Thomas's. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the house. So many memories, so many years, and underneath all of it, a truth that had never been spoken. I took a deep breath, then stepped out. Ethan opened the door before I could knock. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but there was something else there too. Determination. "He's in the living room," Ethan said. I nodded and stepped inside. And there he was, Thomas Whitaker, sitting in his usual chair, calm, composed, like nothing in the world had changed. He looked up when he saw me. "Jeremiah," he said, his voice even. "I wasn't expecting you." "No," I replied. "I don't think you were." Ethan stepped in behind me. "Dad," he said, We need to talk. Thomas's eyes moved between us, taking it in, reading the tension. What's this about? He asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. He walked over to the coffee table and set his phone down, pulling up the photos he had taken of the documents. It's about Mom, he said. Thomas's expression didn't change. Your mother and I have nothing to discuss that concerns you, he said calmly. It does concern me, Ethan shot back, because it's about something you told me my whole life. Now Thomas looked directly at me. What is this? He asked. I stepped forward slowly. It's the truth, I said. Silence. Then Ethan picked up the phone and held it out. These are statements, he said, from soldiers, from people who were there. Thomas didn't take the phone. I don't need to see that, he said. You should. Ethan insisted. I said, I don't need to. Thomas replied, his tone firmer now. The room tightened. You told me Mom stayed here during the war, Ethan said, that she didn't want to be involved. That's correct, Thomas said. No, I said quietly. Both of them turned to me. That's not correct, I repeated. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. Jeremiah, he said this isn't necessary. Yes, it is, I said. Ethan looked between us. Dad, he said, did she go to Vietnam? Thomas didn't answer right away, and that hesitation, that tiny pause, said everything. Yes, he said finally. Ethan blinked. What? She went, Thomas repeated. The air shifted. But you said Ethan started. I said what I thought was best for this family. Thomas interrupted. My chest tightened. There it is, I said softly. Ethan turned to me. What does that mean? He asked. It means he knew I said, and he chose not to tell you. Ethan looked back at his father. Why he demanded? Thomas stood slowly, because for the first time he couldn't stay seated. He couldn't stay comfortable. Because some things are better left in the past, he said. Not when they're lies, I replied. His eyes snapped to mine, and for the first time, there was something in them I hadn't seen in years. Not control, not certainty, fear. Thomas didn't speak right away. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Because the man I had lived with for years, the man who always had an answer, always controlled the room, was suddenly searching, careful, measured, like every word now carried risk. Ethan noticed it too. Dad? He said, his voice tighter than before. Why are you hesitating? Thomas exhaled slowly, straightening his posture like he was preparing to regain control. I'm not hesitating, he said. I'm choosing my words carefully. No, Ethan replied, shaking his head. You're trying to figure out what to say that won't fall apart. The bluntness of it surprised me, but it also told me something else. Ethan wasn't backing down. Thomas's eyes flicked toward him, irritation flashing briefly before being buried again. This is not how you speak to me, he said. And this is not how you lie to me, Ethan shot back. The room went still, completely still. I felt my pulse in my throat, because this was the moment everything cracked open. Thomas turned slowly toward me. You brought this into our home? He said, his voice low. I met his gaze. No, I said. It's always been here. Ethan stepped closer to the table, placing both hands on it. I want the truth, he said. Thomas looked at him. Long, carefully. Then finally, he spoke. Yes, he said. Your mother went to Vietnam. Ethan stepped closer to the table, placing both hands on it. I want the truth, he said. Thomas looked at him, long, carefully. Then finally, he spoke. Yes, he said. Your mother went to Vietnam. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you told me she didn't, he said. I told you what was necessary, Thomas replied. For who, Ethan demanded. Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked a few steps toward the window, his back partially turned to us. For this family, he said finally. There it is again, I said softly. That phrase, that justification. Ethan turned to me. What does that even mean? He asked. It means, I said, my voice steady now, that his family's reputation mattered more than the truth. Thomas turned back sharply. That's not fair, he said. No, I replied. Then explain it. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Richard had a career, Thomas said, a future. He was building something important. And I wasn't, I asked. That's not what I said. But it's what you meant, I said. Silence again. Ethan looked between us, his breathing heavier now. Uncle Richard, he said slowly. This is about Uncle Richard. Thomas didn't answer, which was answer enough. Ethan let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. You're telling me, he said, that you let people believe he did this instead of Mom? Thomas's expression hardened slightly. It wasn't that simple. Then make it simple, Ethan snapped. Because right now, it looks like you stole her story. I didn't steal anything, Thomas said. You erased her, I replied quietly. That hit. I saw it in his eyes. A flicker. Quick. Gone almost immediately. But I saw it. Ethan turned fully toward him now. Did you know, he asked, about what she did? Another pause. Then, yes, Thomas said. The word landed like a weight dropping onto the floor. Ethan blinked. You knew, he repeated. Yes. And you still, he stopped himself, shaking his head. I could see the anger rising now, the confusion turning into something sharper. Why, he demanded. Thomas took a slow breath. Because sometimes, he said, telling the truth creates more damage than good. That's not the truth, Ethan said. That's control. Thomas' jaw tightened. You don't understand the position I was in, he said. Then explain it, Ethan insisted. Another silence. He couldn't, not without saying the thing he had been avoiding all along. So I said it for him. You chose your brother over me, I said. Thomas' eyes snapped to mine. That's not what this was, he said. It is exactly what it was, I replied. Ethan looked at me, then back at him. You let me grow up thinking my own mother? He stopped, his voice cracking slightly, was someone who didn't do anything. My chest tightened. Ethan. No, he said, holding up a hand. I need to say this. He turned back to Thomas. You made me look at her like she was small, he said, like she had nothing to offer. Thomas didn't respond, because there was nothing he could say. That's what hurts, Ethan continued. Not just the lie, but what that lie did. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I didn't look away. I needed him to say it. I needed him to see it. You didn't just hide something, Ethan said. You changed who she was to me. The words hung in the air. Heavy, unavoidable. Thomas's shoulders dropped slightly, just enough to show the weight of it. I did what I thought was necessary, he said quietly. No, Ethan said. You did what was easier. That hit harder than anything else, because it was true, and Thomas knew it. I could see it in the way his eyes shifted, in the way he didn't argue, didn't push back, just stood there. Finally, without control. Stood there, finally, without control. Did Uncle Richard know? Ethan asked suddenly. That question landed differently, sharper, more dangerous. Thomas hesitated again, longer this time. Yes, he said. My breath caught. Ethan's expression darkened. He knew. Did Uncle Richard know? Ethan asked suddenly. That question landed differently, sharper, more dangerous. Thomas hesitated again, longer this time. Yes, he said. My breath caught. Ethan's expression darkened. He knew, he repeated. Yes. And he just took it, Ethan asked. Thomas didn't answer. He didn't need to. Ethan laughed again, but this time it was bitter. Unbelievable, he muttered. I stepped forward slightly. Ethan. No, Mom, he said, shaking his head. You don't get it. He turned to me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not blame, something closer to regret. I should have seen it, he said. You couldn't have, I replied softly. I didn't even try, he said. You believed what you were told, I said. That's not your fault. But it feels like it is, he said quietly. I moved closer to him. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slightly, before turning back to Thomas. There's going to be a ceremony, he said. Thomas frowned. What ceremony? To recognize what actually happened? Ethan said. At the Veterans Hall. Thomas' expression shifted again. Concern. Jeremiah, he said, turning to me. You don't need to do that. Yes, I said. I do. It will bring attention, he said. Questions. Good, I replied. That's not how this works, he said, his voice tightening again. You don't understand the consequences. No, I said calmly. You're the one who doesn't understand anymore. Silence. I'm not staying quiet, I added. And this time, there was no hesitation in my voice. None at all. The silence that followed my words didn't feel fragile anymore. It felt final, like something had been decided, even if no one had said it out loud yet. Thomas looked at me in a way he hadn't in years. Not as someone he could guide, not as someone he could quiet, but as someone he could no longer control. You're making a mistake, he said finally. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a warning. No, I replied. I've been making a mistake for 30 years. This is me fixing it. Ethan shifted beside me, his eyes still locked on his father. What happens if this comes out? Thomas asked, his tone sharpening. Do you have any idea what kind of damage it could do? To idea what kind of damage it could do? To who I asked. You know exactly who, he said. Say it, I replied. He hesitated, and that hesitation told Ethan everything. Uncle Richard, Ethan said quietly. Thomas didn't respond. He built his career on this, didn't he, who I asked. You know exactly who, he said. Say it, I replied. He hesitated, and that hesitation told Ethan everything. Uncle Richard. Ethan said quietly. Thomas didn't respond. He built his career on this, didn't he? Ethan continued. On something that wasn't even his. It's more complicated than that, Thomas said quickly. No, I said. It isn't. I stepped forward. For decades, people believed he was a hero for something I did, I said. And I stayed quiet while that lie grew. Thomas' jaw tightened. You agreed to that, he said. The words hit hard. Yes, I said. Ethan turned toward me, surprised. You agreed, he asked. I agreed to stay silent, I clarified. That's not the same as agreeing to the lie. But you knew what that silence would do, Thomas pressed. Yes, I said. And I regret it. That stopped him. Because I didn't deny it. I didn't soften it. I owned it. I regret every year I let this continue. I added. Ethan looked between us, his expression shifting again. Less confusion now. More understanding. You were protecting us, he said quietly. I thought I was, I replied. But I wasn't. Thomas let out a breath, shaking his head slightly. You don't understand what this will become, he said. Once it's public, there's no controlling it. I'm not trying to control it, I said. That's the problem, he snapped. Ethan stepped in then. No, he said. The problem is that you've been controlling it for years. Thomas turned toward him. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, Ethan replied. He gestured toward the document still open on the table. I know that multiple people said Mom was there, he said. I know there's a report with Uncle Richard's name on it that doesn't match their statements. He took a step closer. And I know you knew the truth, he added. Thomas didn't respond. Not this time. Did you ever think about what that would do to her? Ethan asked. That question landed differently. Not accusatory, not sharp, just honest and heavy. Thomas looked at me, really looked, for the first time in a long time. And I saw something there, something small, but real. Regret. It wasn't supposed to go this far, he said quietly. The words felt almost fragile. I held his gaze. But it did, I said, and you let it, Ethan added. Thomas looked away. That was the moment I knew. He had no defense left, no explanation that could hold together. Only the truth. And even that was late. I can't undo what's been done, he said. No, I replied. You can't? Ethan crossed his arms. But you can tell the truth now, he said. Thomas shook his head. It's not that simple. It is, I said. It's just not easy. Another silence settled over the room. But this one felt different. Less tense, more decisive, because the lines had been drawn. There's a ceremony, I said again, at the Veterans Hall. Thomas didn't look at me this time. I heard he said, I'm going, I continued. I figured, and I'm not hiding anything anymore. That made him look up. And what do you expect to happen? He asked. I expect the truth to be heard, I said. And then, he pressed. Then whatever comes next, comes next. He studied me for a long moment. You're not thinking about the consequences, he said. No, I replied calmly. I am. I just don't think fear should decide them anymore. Ethan nodded beside me. I'm going with her, he said. That surprised both of us. Thomas looked at him sharply. You don't have to get involved in this, he said. I already am, Ethan replied. This is bigger than you understand. Then maybe it's time I understand it. Ethan said. Thomas looked between us. Two people he had spent years, gooey ding, managing, protecting. And now I already am, Ethan replied. This is bigger than you understand. Then maybe it's time I understand it, Ethan said. Thomas looked between us. Two people he had spent years guiding, managing, protecting. And now neither of us were asking for his permission anymore. You're making a mistake, he said again. But this time it sounded weaker, like something he wasn't even fully sure of anymore. No, I said quietly. I'm finally doing something right. Silence. Long, heavy. And then Thomas sat down, slowly, like the weight of everything had finally caught up with him. I never meant to hurt you, he said. The words were directed at me, but they felt incomplete. I know, I replied. Ethan looked at me surprised again. You do? He asked. Yes, I said, because the truth was, I did know. Thomas hadn't done this out of cruelty. He had done it out of fear, out of pride, out of a belief that he was protecting something important. But intention didn't erase impact. You still did, I added. Thomas nodded, once, slowly. I know. That was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get. And maybe, for now, it was enough. Not forgiveness, not resolution, but acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. I'll see you at the ceremony, I said. It wasn't a question. Thomas didn't respond right away. Then finally, we'll see, he said. Ethan turned toward me. He'll pick you up, he said. I nodded. Okay. As we walked toward the door, I didn't look back right away. But just before stepping outside, I did. Thomas was still sitting there. Quiet. Still. No longer in control. And for the first time in decades. Neither was I afraid of him. The days leading up to the ceremony moved strangely. Too fast, and not fast enough at the same time. Every morning, I woke up with the same thought pressing against my chest. This is really happening. And every night I lay awake wondering what it would cost. Not just publicly, but personally. Ethan and I spoke every day. Not long conversations, but steady ones. Grounded, real. He had questions more than I could answer sometimes. About Vietnam, about the evacuation, about the moments I had never spoken of before. Were you scared? He asked me one evening. I let out a quiet breath. Yes, I said, every single time. Then why did you keep going back in? He asked. I paused, because that question didn't have a simple answer. Because someone had to. I said finally. There was silence on the line. Then, I think I'm starting to understand, he said. That meant more than I expected, not just because he was listening, but because he was trying. Thomas, on the other hand, he didn't call, didn't reach out, didn't ask questions. He simply withdrew. And for once, I didn't chase him. I didn't explain. I didn't soften anything. Because this time, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I was standing in the truth. The morning of the ceremony arrived with a quiet stillness, the kind that settles in before something important happens. I stood in front of my closet longer than I needed to, not because I didn't know what to wear, but because I understood what this moment meant. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was a correction, a reclaiming, a line drawn between who I had been told I was and who I actually was. In the end, I chose something simple. Dark blue, Plain, respectful. I didn't need anything else, because this wasn't about appearance. It was about truth. At exactly 10 o'clock, Ethan pulled into my driveway. I saw him through the window before he even knocked. He looked different, still serious, still carrying the weight of everything he had learned, but steadier, more certain. I opened the door before he could ring the bell. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I replied. For a moment, we just stood there. Then he nodded slightly. "You ready?" he asked. I took a breath. "No," I said honestly. Then I straightened my shoulders. "But I'm going anyway." A faint smile crossed his face. "Good," he said. The drive to the Veterans Hall felt quieter than the last time, but not heavy, not uncertain. This time, it felt like purpose. When we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed something immediately. Cars. More than I expected. People gathered outside, some in uniform, some older, some holding small flags. Ethan noticed it too. "This is bigger than I thought," he said. "So did I replied quietly. We stepped out of the car together, and as we walked toward the building, I felt it. Eyes, not judgmental, not critical, just aware, watching, recognizing. Inside the hall was already filled, the same wooden walls, the same names carved into them, but now it felt different, alive, intentional. A few people turned as we entered. Whispers moved through the room, soft, respectful. And then I saw him. Franklin Hayes, standing near the front. He caught my eye immediately and smiled. Not wide, not showy, just proud. Like he had been waiting for this moment longer than anyone else in the room. He walked over to us. "You made it," he said. "I did," I replied. He looked at Ethan. "And this must be your son." Ethan nodded. "Ethan," he said. Franklin extended his hand. "Franklin Hayes." Ethan shook it. "You're one of the men she saved," he said. Franklin smiled faintly. "One of the lucky ones," he replied. Ethan glanced at me briefly, and I saw it again. That shift, that quiet understanding settling deeper. "Thank you," Ethan said. Franklin shook his head. "No," he said. "You thank her." The room began to settle as people took their seats. A man stepped up to the front podium. "Mr. Brooks." He adjusted the microphone, glancing out at the audience. "We're here today," he began, to correct something that should have been addressed a long time ago. The room went quiet, completely still. I felt Ethan shift beside me, not nervous, present, listening. This recognition, Mr. Brooks continued, was delayed, not because the truth didn't exist, but because it was not allowed to be seen. A ripple moved through the audience, soft, understanding. Today, he said, we honor that truth. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Jeremiah Whitaker, he called. For a split second, I couldn't move, because for so many years, that name had been quiet, small, almost invisible, and now it filled the room. Ethan touched my arm gently. "Go," he said. I stepped forward. Each step felt deliberate, grounded, real. As I reached the front, I turned slightly, and that's when I saw him. Thomas, standing at the back of the room, I hadn't heard him come in, hadn't expected him to. But there he was, watching, not proud, not smiling, but present. And for the first time, that was enough. I turned back toward the front, toward the podium, toward the truth. And I stood there, not as the woman they thought I was, but as the woman I had always been. Standing at the front of that room, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't nervous anymore. Not the way I thought I would be. There was no shaking in my hands, no hesitation in my breath. Just clarity. Mr. Brooks stepped slightly aside, giving me space at the podium. I looked out at the room, rows of faces, some strangers, some veterans, some who already knew, some who were just beginning to understand. And in the back, Thomas, still standing, still watching. And beside him now, I noticed someone else, Richard Whitaker. He must have arrived quietly, just like Thomas, just like the truth had been kept all these years. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and in his, I saw something different. Not denial, not pride, something closer to unease. Good. I turned back to the microphone. For a second, the room felt completely silent. Then I spoke. My name is Jeremiah Whitaker, I said. The words sounded different now, stronger, anchored, and for a long time, I let other people decide what that name meant. A quiet ripple moved through the audience, not loud, but present. I didn't speak about what happened. I continued, not because I forgot, but because I was asked to. I paused, letting that settle, because I believed that staying silent would protect the people I loved. I glanced briefly toward the back of the room. Not directly, but enough. I was wrong. The honesty of it hung in the air, clear, unfiltered. I thought silence was strength, I said, but it wasn't. I took a breath. It was fear. No one moved. No one spoke. They were listening. Really listening. And fear has a way of rewriting things, I continued, of turning truth into something smaller, quieter, easier to ignore. My hands rested lightly on the podium. Steady. I was there, I said. No hesitation, no softness. Just truth. I was in Vietnam. I was part of the evacuation. And I went back more than once when I was told not to. A few heads shifted in the audience. A few expressions changed. But no one looked away. I didn't do it because I was brave, I said. I did it because there were people who needed help, and no one else was going back in. My voice softened slightly. But what happened after wasn't about what I did. I looked out again, across the room, toward the back. It became about what was easier to say. The weight of that sentence landed, heavier than anything else I had spoken so far. I let that happen, I admitted. There it was, my part, my responsibility. My silence allowed someone else to carry something that wasn't theirs. A shift, subtle, but unmistakable. People knew what I meant, even if I hadn't said his name, yet. I told myself it was for the good of the family. I said that it would prevent conflict, that it would keep things stable. I let out a quiet breath. But all it really did was erase something that mattered. My voice steadied again. And it didn't just erase me. I glanced toward Ethan. He was watching me with a look I couldn't fully describe. Something between pride and pain. It changed how my own son saw me, I said. The room grew even quieter, if that was possible. Not because he did anything wrong, I added quickly, but because he was given a version of me that wasn't real. I paused, letting that truth exist without rushing past it. And that's what silence does, I continued. It doesn't just hide the truth. It replaces it. A long stillness followed. Then I straightened slightly. But today, we're not doing that anymore. A shift, energy, purpose. I'm not here to take anything away from anyone, I said. I'm here to give something back. My eyes moved again, toward Richard. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but he was listening. And now, he couldn't avoid it. The truth doesn't belong to one person, I said. It belongs to everyone who lived it. My voice softened again. And to everyone who needs to hear it. I stepped back slightly from the microphone. For a moment, I thought that was all I needed to say. But then, I saw Franklin, standing near the front, watching me with that same quiet pride. And I realized something else. There was one more truth that needed to be spoken. I forgive the silence, I said. The words surprised even me. But they felt right. I don't agree with it. I don't accept what it did. But I forgive it. A ripple moved through the room again, stronger this time, because forgiveness wasn't expected. Because holding on to that would only keep me where I've already been, I continued. I looked once more toward the back, at Thomas, at Richard. I'm not staying there anymore. And with that, I stepped away from the podium. For a moment, nothing happened. Then someone stood. Then another. Then another. Applause filled the room. Not loud at first, but building, growing, until it became something undeniable. Not just recognition, respect. Ethan was on his feet, clapping, looking at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. Franklin stepped forward, placing a hand briefly on my shoulder. You did it, he said quietly. I nodded, but my eyes were still on the back of the room. Thomas hadn't moved, but his expression had changed. Not resistance, not control, something softer, something human. And Richard. He lowered his gaze, just slightly, but enough to tell me he understood. The truth had reached him, and whether he liked it or not, it wasn't going away. Not this time. The applause didn't fade quickly. It lingered, not just in the room, but inside me. For years I had imagined what it might feel like to be seen, to be understood. But this wasn't what I imagined. It wasn't loud in the way I expected. It wasn't overwhelming. It was steady, grounded, real, like something finally settling into place. When the applause quieted, people began to move. Some approached me. Others stayed where they were, watching, respectful. Franklin stayed close, not hovering, just present. You okay? He asked quietly. I nodded. I think I am, I said, and for the first time in a long time. That felt true. Ethan reached me next. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, really looked. And then he pulled me into a hug. It wasn't quick. It wasn't polite. It was real, tight, steady, the kind of hug that says everything words can't quite reach. I'm sorry, he said into my shoulder. My chest tightened. For what? I asked softly. For not seeing you. he replied. I pulled back slightly, looking at him. You see me now, I said. He nodded, and in his eyes there was no doubt anymore. No confusion, just clarity. And something else. Respect. That mattered more than anything. Behind him, I saw Thomas slowly making his way forward. Not rushed, not confident, just moving, like each step required thought, effort. Richard didn't follow. He stayed where he was, but he didn't leave either. Thomas stopped a few feet in front of me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There were too many years between us, too many things unsaid, too much weight. I didn't expect you to speak like that, he said finally. His voice was quiet, different. I didn't expect to, I replied. A faint, almost sad smile crossed his face. That sounds like you, he said. I studied him, because this man, the man who had once shaped so much of my silence, looked smaller now. Not weak, just human. I should have. Not weak, just human. I should have told the truth, he said. The words were simple, but they carried more weight than anything he had said before. Yes, I said. I thought I was protecting something important, he continued. I know, I replied. He nodded slightly, but I see now he hesitated, searching for the right words. I was protecting the wrong thing. That landed. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. And that mattered. Ethan stood beside me listening, not interrupting, not reacting, just taking it in. I can't fix what I did, Thomas said. No, I agreed, but I can stop pretending it didn't happen, he added. I held his gaze. That's where it starts, I said. Another silence, but this one wasn't heavy. It wasn't tense. It was open, like something had shifted. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Thomas looked at Ethan. I'm sorry, he said. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, processing, feeling. Then finally, he nodded. I needed to hear that he said. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't rejection either. It was a beginning, and sometimes that's all you get. Thomas stepped back slightly. Not leaving, just giving space. Franklin leaned in toward me again. You handled that better than most people would, he said. I smiled faintly. I had a lot of time to think about it, I replied. He chuckled softly. Yeah, he said. I guess you did. People continued to approach. Some shook my hand. Some simply nodded. A few said thank you in quiet, sincere voices. And each time, I accepted it. Not with disbelief, not with hesitation, but with understanding, because now I knew what it meant. After a while, the room began to thin out. The energy softened. The moment settled. Ethan and I stepped outside together. The air felt different, lighter, clear. He leaned against the car, exhaling slowly. He shook his head. I don't even know what that was. I smiled. Neither do I said. But it mattered, he added. Yes, I said. It did. He looked at me again. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. Why now? He asked. After all these years, why now? I thought about that. About the wall, the file. Helen, Franklin, the silence. And the moment everything shifted. Because I finally realized something I said. What that being forgotten isn't always an accident. The file, Helen, Franklin, the silence, and the moment everything shifted. Because I finally realized something. I said, "What? That being forgotten isn't always an accident," I said. "Sometimes it's something we allow." He nodded slowly. "And you're not allowing it anymore," he said. "No," I replied. I looked out at the street, at the quiet movement of life continuing, normal, unaware. And yet everything had changed. "I'm not invisible anymore," I said. Ethan smiled slightly. "No," he said, "you're not." We stood there for a moment longer. Then he opened the car door for me. "Let's go home," he said. Home. The word felt different now. Not smaller, not quiet, but whole. As we drove away, I looked back one last time at the building, at the place where my name had been waiting for me, and I realized something. It hadn't just been carved into that wall. It had been carved into time, into memory, into truth. And no one could take that away again. For most of my life, I believed that silence was a form of strength, that holding things and protecting others and avoiding conflict was the right way to live. I thought that if I stayed quiet long enough, the past would fade and the truth wouldn't matter anymore. But I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect the truth, it protects the lie. And sometimes the cost of that silence is far greater than we realize. It changes how people see us. It changes how we see ourselves. And if we're not careful, it can erase parts of our life that deserve to be remembered. What I learned is this: it's never too late to reclaim your story. It's never too late to speak your truth. And it's never too late to be seen. Even if it takes years, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if people don't understand right away, because truth has a way of finding its way back, just like it did for me. If this story touched you in any way, I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family, or like your story wasn't fully understood? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone, and if you believe in stories about truth healing and second chances, don't forget to like and subscribe, because sometimes the stories we need most are the ones that were almost never told.